welcome to the Throw-In Hurling Show with me, Michael Verney, and I'm delighted to be joined once again by Eddie Brennan and John Mullane to look back on another exhilarating weekend of hurling action. Eddie, have you caught your breath? It was an amazing day yesterday. Trills and spills between Pearse Stadium, Corrigan Park, Nolan Park, the Gaelic grounds, Thurles. It was a fair finale.
Yeah, it was, and I suppose even the young lad was saying to me, we're just, we're in at the match yesterday, and even chatting yesterday evening, we were watching the Limerick and Waterford match, and he's kind of saying, "Jesus, why didn't they put the matches on Saturday evening? One, the Leinster ones, and so sure, look, we'd all have got it would have been a double whammy, and it would have been great. It would have been just a festival of hurling for any of us. But yeah, there was plenty of drama, I suppose. There was so much riding on it, and they were all effectively, bar, I suppose in some ways the only one that wasn't was there was no real gain, only respect for Tipperary. But across all the other ones, they were all playing for spots in a provincial final, that created a great old atmosphere in it. And even, I was sitting in the stand in Nolan Park, and our lads started kind of grinding through the gears, and they got into a good position. And next thing, we were suddenly kind of keeping tabs, and you heard there was a man sent off and got in Salt Hill, and then Dublin were starting to find their rhythm and get in front, and you were just looking at how it was going to fall. And then suddenly Wexford started making a comeback, and Kilkenny, arguably should have won that match by 6 or 7 points. They definitely had a couple of poor wides when they had Wexford in trouble. And then Wexford came back, and sure, look, as to borrow John's one, they were throwing the kitchen sink at Kilkenny, and it just created a great finale. And obviously then there was, drama up north as well in the Antrim match. And obviously then, look, we I think it's fair to say that Waterford probably just strangled the life out of Waterford in that match. And Waterford were game. They, got a couple of good goals that kept them in that match. But yeah, Limerick looked to be decent yesterday, and still were able to, Shane O'Brien appeared early in that match and done well. So yeah, good finale, good excitement. Definitely Leinster turned out a little bit unpredictable. I think the standout performers, obviously the Dubs, and we spoke about that at the start. We felt there wasn't that to suggest from their league campaign. But to be fair, I think John said it as well, that Micheál Donoghue had been flittered with injuries. And once he started getting a strong squad back, they started to find their rhythm, and they find the team, and they've a good squad now. They'll really fancy that Leinster final.
Mull, we'll get into the meat of Leinster in a few minutes, but I know you were in the Gaelic grounds looking at your own Waterford against Limerick. Any question marks, John, that we have over Limerick have probably been put to bed a small bit here. They finished top of the table, top of the round robin, lads, for the first time, actually, amazingly. They'd never topped the round robin before. Not that it means much, but I suppose it shows that they're in fairly rude health. And Kylie said as much after. He says the trajectory of this team at this time of the year is higher than any of the previous years. But Mull, it looked like everything was kind of back in sync for Limerick yesterday, didn't it?
Well, before we go there, I'm not going to have anyone ever give out about parking down outside Welsh Park, or, this parking is wrong, what's called. Try being stuck in a car park, Dunstores car park, for over an hour yesterday. Oh, Jesus, lads, I'll tell you. And having 3 kids in the back saying, when is the car going to move? When is the car going to move?
Hey, Mull, I'll raise you on that. A couple of years ago, when Cork played Limerick in 2019, I parked in the Arthur's Quay shopping centre. Grand job, lovely. No. Walked in, beautiful, lovely. Walked back out. 2 minutes past 8. Arthur's Quay completely locked up for the night. My car stuck in there for the night, so it could have been worse. I tell you, I had to be fairly creative with how I found accommodation that night, I can tell you.
Oh, stop. Yeah, jeez. I just about got home. I put the Sunday game, the RT2 +1 came into great work last night. But yeah, no, look, going back to it, Limerick, yeah, look, they were awesome back to themselves yesterday. 49 scoring opportunities, scored 30, missed 19. And look, when the questions were asked going into those last 12, 13 minutes when it was back to 2 points, they just found another gear. Experience kicked in. Limerick did what they do best. Game management kicked in. Yeah. The impact off their bench was incredible. you know, when you're thinking that they're going to be down Seamus Flanagan, you know, on top of that, Peter Casey was out, Darrell Donovan, Sean Finn. And when Flanagan went off and it was kind of 1-4 to 4 points, I said, geez, Waterford have a cracking chance. And then enter the fray. Shane O'Brien comes in and picks off 3 points, really, really put his hand up the weekend. And I was actually looking at Shane O'Brien, lads, and it was interesting how they used Shane O'Brien the last couple of weeks. Didn't feature in any of the games, played all the under-20 games, and I actually watched them 2 weeks ago against Waterford on, it was a Friday night, it was on Rackeel, it was on TG4 YouTube, and it was the weekend that they played Cork, wasn't even named in the panel. And even that night against Waterford in the under-20s, he was moving very, very well. Now, in saying that, in other games, they were saying that he wasn't going so well in some of the other under-20 games. But I wouldn't mind that, because you've seen time and time again when you're playing outside your own age group, you know, the expectation is that you have to go out and deliver 1-3, 1-4 every game. And sometimes it doesn't work out that way. And sometimes I think a player, when he goes into the senior group, he's more freer, you know, knowing that the pressures aren't going to be so high on his shoulders. And
you're also coming into a system where you're just a cog of the wheel, as opposed to being nearly the whole wheel, if you get me as well.
Yeah,
but even on top of that, John, I'm just going to jump in. If you take, right, who was the matchup for Flanagan? After 20 minutes, he has a new fella that he never even thought about, and probably the Waterford management probably didn't look at the. Do you know, you mightn't have been planning for that. So suddenly now you have a corner back all week long. You're psyching yourself up for Shamey Flanagan. You're studying him. You're trying to nullify his strengths, and now you have something completely different. It can be tough.
Yeah, and in saying that, though, like Kyle Hayes was immense. Was brilliant. One thing, and look, it's hard to be critical of the Waterford team. In hindsight, it's great thing. Just found it strange that, you know, they went with Jamie on Kyle Hayes, height advantage there. They went with Desi for large parts of the first half, out centre forward. Jack Pender then went wing forward. So we effectively had 3 small men across the half forward at stages of the first half, which I found.
Leaving Kiley off. Leaving Mike Kiley off was a funny one for me.
Yeah, and even they left it till the last 67, 68 minutes to bring in Jack Fagan. Like, your 2 aerial ball winners are Michael Kiley and Jack Fagan. And you're saying, like, geez, if you're going to go and take on this Limerick half forward and you're going to lump ball down on top of that Limerick half back line, you need an aerial presence. And I think what Limerick were very good yesterday, and the worry, and I did say it in previous 1 or 2 of the previous podcasts, the worry I had for Waterford was, and I seen it again the night against Tipperary, when Tipperary elected to push up on the Waterford puck out, Waterford struggled on their own puck out. And yesterday, that was very evident again, where Limerick pushed up on the Waterford puck out, and we just couldn't win primary possession. We got eaten up alive. For me, you know, you'd have to ask the question: how much did that game take out of Waterford last week up in Ennis? Davy commented on it after the match that the energy levels, the same drive possibly wasn't there. But you know, great credit has to go to Limerick. You know, their big men came to the fore. Hegarty came to the fore. Conal O'Neill, lads, Jesus!
Yeah, he's having some season.
When they got it back to 2 points, he won a free down on the sideline. He 3 Waterford men around him. It was probably Neil's free to give away, but he was the one man that kind of, you know, drove forward and said, "Right, lads, I'm going to lead the way." And then the rest followed behind him. You know, Lynch came to the fore. Will O'Donoghue was back to his normal self, grafting, grinding down people, chasing lost causes. You know, Burns got back. You know, even from place balls, there was a vast improvement. Hannon looked back to himself. Big plus, as I touched on, was getting back Mike Casey. I thought it was strange enough when the game was in the balance, they took him off with 10 minutes to go. You know, because he was going so well, and I've seen, you know, is he injured? No, but it was precautionary. Nash was very good, but look, Kyle Hayes, lads. I mean, he was brilliant on the wing. And yeah, look, I think Limerick are in a fantastic position. For Waterford, I think the one best player for Waterford for me yesterday, and it was strangely enough that it was his first championship action was Paddy Levy. I mean, he was probably Waterford's best player in the league. I thought he was brilliant yesterday. But look, I think again Waterford were hanging in there. You know, Limerick possibly should have been out of sight at half time, and I was kind of saying to myself, is it going to be something similar that what played out up in Ennis the previous week, where, you know, Clare left an awful lot of chances behind, Waterford kind of hung in there, and then when they got it back to 2 points, the goal came. You're saying, right, 12, 13 minutes left in the clock. They had 3 opportunities after that. Yeah. If they would have even gotten it back to a point, the Waterford crowd were starting to make noise. The Limerick crowd were starting to quieten a small bit. And then they just came with that blister. And,
in the space of a couple of minutes, they had it just yawned it out to 4.
Yeah, and look, Eddie, you're 100% right. In the space of 5 minutes, you know, in the blink of an eye, they went from being 2 points up to all of a sudden then just going 6-7 points up, having that buffer 6 or 7, and the game was effectively over after that. Then, you know,
Ned, have Cork done Limerick a favour in a sense here? Because it looks like they're really going after solidifying that half back line again. Kylie was talking about it a lot, even in the aftermath of the game, and like little potential holes or vulnerabilities. I get the feeling now that Limerick, just out of pig ignorance sake, are going to make sure that they're not exposed in those positions again.
Yeah, sure. That's the craft of it is, and they seem to be better than most at fixing their setup, the kind of the values that they have, and some days when the kind of a team manages to pry them open a little bit and you know, they fix them or whatever, but you know, the way Cork probably done them, you know, has given them something to think about, because I think it's fair to say even their energy levels that night, you know, were subdued for long periods, and it was only then when they got a sniff, and it was just, I suppose, look, Cork just wouldn't go away, and Cork grounded out that night. But yeah, forewarned is forearmed. So I think the big thing, a lot of us were saying, you know, you're looking at it and saying, how can they be stopped? Well, it's now down to someone clipping them in an All-Ireland semi-final potentially, or whatever happens in the Munster final, whether they go the back door, you know, the preliminary route or the quarter-final route. But yeah, look, they're growing in confidence, and probably on that as well is, again, the resilience of the group is being tested, because they're losing lads with injuries like Seamus Flanagan. You could see he was disgusted going off yesterday, because he was probably looking forward to that match in a big way, knowing that if they can get into that Munster final and whoever it was going to be. But for the younger guys there coming in, like, I mean, they're getting great experience, they're getting great exposure. What you're having there, like as we said there, is they're very strategic with their substitutes as well. Like Mike Casey there just ground down opponents yesterday, and then suddenly you now have a fresh O'Connor coming in there to deal with lads who energy levels are sapping just a little bit. And in fairness to Limerick, look, they've steadied the ship a little bit. They probably decided, like, we're going to hold that half back line now a little bit. We don't get you pulled up the field too much. And yet Hannon found himself in pockets of space going forward yesterday as well. And like, look, Kyle Hayes, we can argue about that. He could have been sitting on the line very easily yesterday, but he had a monster game for them. And like Muller said earlier on, Burns was after fixing the free-taking thing. So they look to be in good health. But I think, to be fair, central to that, Hegarty is re-energised. He is really, really back to his best. And then you have Cotton O'Neill. And by God, they're two serious men to try stop, because they're so mobile. They get around the pitch so much. And they get a sniff of a point from anywhere around their own half-back line, they'll have a punt.
You just touched on that there, Verney, as well. Sorry. They've definitely taken the learnings from that Cork game, particularly on the Cork puck out, where Cork went down the central spine of the Limerick defence with their puck out. And I was even watching, you know, the positioning of Kyle Hayes, Burns, even Will O'Donoghue, Lynch at times coming back in. You know, they kind of came in rather than holding their lines where you know, usually Burns he wouldn't come in or Hayes would hold his line. And look, that's where Cork got an enormous amount of joy where, Harnedy came in, Decky Dalton came in, you had Barrett. But it was very, very interesting yesterday that, they confined that space on the Waterford pocket when Waterford went down the central channel. But just going back to Flanagan, lads, a hamstring injury now, and it looks like, a hamstring injury this time of year, without breaking a finger or breaking a bone where you're out for 4 to 5 weeks, you do a hamstring injury now. Jesus, lads, it's you've done it before, Eddie. I've done it before. It's more a mental thing. It's probably the worst injury you can get this time of year. And he's probably looking at 6 weeks now. So effectively, they're going to be down Peter Casey. They're going to be down Flanagan. Obviously, Sean Finn is on the way back. Now, look, granted, some of these young fellas are putting their hands up. But, lads, when they get back into Croke Park, Flanagan is a Croke Park player.
Yeah.
Peter Casey is a Croke Park player. They're tried, they're tested, they're proven in Croke Park. And, all of a sudden, if you're going to be down those two tried and tested bodies going into the All-Ireland series, I think it's going to be a bit of a blow for them.
And the same, just the last point I'll make, Michael, is I thought Willie Donoghue, I know he got a point yesterday, which he hadn't done for a while, but he seemed to just, I think when 2-3 years ago, his role was really just the guard dog around that half-back line. He was making sure that nobody, and I thought yesterday he just seemed to be working more around there, Hannon a little bit more, and he's the one that goes and hunts lads down and doesn't have that Hannon gets pulled left or right too much. They kept, as you said, they kept it nice and compact.
I said it before, I say it again. I outside of Nicky Quaid, I think he's their most important player because I don't think they can do without him. I don't think they have a replacement for him. O'Donoghue, I think he's brilliant. He does all that donkey work, that thankless kind of work. Well, I'll just throw it back to you quickly. I'd be of the opinion that Limerick are humming lovely, coming in at the perfect time. Their scoring efficiency will be a lot better the next day, and they basically have 3 wins, lads, and they have 5 in a row and 6 Munsters. They're exactly where they wanted to be at the start of the Munster campaign. But just on Waterford, Mull, it's obviously the second year in a row that they haven't got out of round robin. Like, completely different fortunes this year. They played some really good stuff, maybe up until yesterday. Would you expect Davy to be at the helm for next year again?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. Couldn't see why not. Look, I think ultimately it will probably come down to Davy himself, whether he wants to come back for year 3. There's not a whole lot of jobs out there. Maybe the Galway job might pop up, but yeah, I see Davy being back for year 3. Would I have said that after the league? I would have said, he most certainly needs a good championship to secure a year 3. And for me, look, I think there's no argument. I think Davy will be back for year 3. I think when you break down the 4 games overall, I think it's been a very, very good Munster campaign for Davy Fitzgerald and this team. They've been extremely unlucky. When you think of the couple of lifelines that Cork have gotten, Cork got 3 lifelines to find themselves in the All-Ireland series. Waterford were extremely unlucky. You go back to that game against Tipperary. If they would have closed out that match, that would have been almost good enough to see him through to the All-Ireland series. Extremely unlucky up in Ennis. Beat Cork, as we well know. And look, yesterday, 12, 13 minutes on the clock, albeit Limerick at all those wides. They were right there. It was a 2-point game before Limerick found the gears. And look, Limerick have done that to other teams, so there's absolutely no shame in the way that game played out yesterday. But look, there's an awful lot of positives we've taken out of it. You look at Paddy Levy, he's brought in an awful lot of young lads as well. The 2 Fitzgeralds, they're really going to put their hand up. Mark Fitzgerald, for me, he's been top class. You go through it even at the back, getting the Burka back, you can get Prunty back on the field. If he can add a couple more players next year, I'm sure. Look, the big one for Davy is, the reappearance of Austin, how he's going to approach that. You know what I mean? That's going to be a new player for Waterford next year. And I think, look, the approach has to be, you know, get Austin back in straight away after the club campaign, get him back into shape, get him back training. And I will be saying, you know, get a real good winter campaign into Austin, and then all of a sudden you've you know, he's like a new signing. I mean, he's a creme de la creme player. And look, he next year's league campaign, he can blood a couple more young lads. Probably a big blow for Waterford was the loss of Darragh Lyons. I think, you know, considering how good he was going in the first two games, you know, him coming off up in Clare, him not playing yesterday. But all in all, I think, yeah, for me, he would have my backing in coming back for 2025. And I don't think there'll be any arguments within the county. And realistically, Verney, if Davy wasn't to come back, then all of a sudden you're looking for a manager, and there isn't a whole lot out there that you could say that would put their hand up.
Would himself and Henry swap?
throw the keys in the ball.
No. Just even on I thought yesterday as well, John, joking obviously, but if I thought they were a bit unlucky with some of I thought they were refereed kind of hard yesterday. And I'm not saying, like, it's not, look, it shouldn't take away from Limerick, because they were utterly dominant. They had those 14 wides in the first half, but geez, I thought the Prunty one there on Gallan was harsh, and it was at a time when that match was in the mix. You know, Gallan was as guilty as Prunty. They were jockeying for position. I couldn't see the problem with it. It was play on for me. And I just thought Limerick seemed to get a few decisions at that stage. And yeah, look, when you are in possession of the ball, I suppose that kind of happens. But I just thought
I thought you were going to come out, Eddie. That's difficult to get the decisions when you're the smaller fish.
Well, sure, look, that's always there. But look, in fairness, you sometimes look, when you have possession, that's when you get the calls. But I just thought some of the, you know, and even too, look, we have to call it. When I look at individual situations, you try to take out the people involved and take out the jerseys and try to look at it. And I'd be very curious to know what information Michael Kennedy got regarding the Kyle Hayes swipe. Like how, like what did they see? What was the information they had? It could have changed the game. And again, we're not going down the route of wanting lads sent off. We don't want that. But you have to say it was a moment in the match that could have very much gone Waterford's way, like, you know, and it's early in the match, and we saw the impact of the Davy Burke one again. So when you put the two of those incidents side by side and you say, you know, which is the more red or whatever, and they're the little calls that sometimes you can get and sometimes you don't, and I just thought that one was a little strange, and I really love to have known what information or who saw that. And if they saw it, what did they see? Because you can see nothing. If you say, oh yeah, he struck him in the head with the hurl, there's only one colour card coming there, you know. So they're the calls, and I think that could have changed that game.
It's funny.
But overall, though, Eddie.
Yeah, no, they were. I agree with you, John. Overall, Limerick were way better.
No, but overall, and I'm not having to go off of Michael, and I think Michael, you know, referees are no different to players. Like, they'll go home and they'll reflect on their performance. And look, I think if Michael Kennedy is a good referee, but I'm sure, look, he'd go home to the wife or go home to the family last night. And, you know, if he's been open and honest, he would probably say to himself, well, look, probably wasn't one of my best days. Probably missed out on a couple of incidents. And look, I think for him, the next day, if he goes out the next day, he'll be trying to rectify the wrongs of missing a couple of calls for both teams. I thought yesterday, you know. So, and look, it's referees. They're human at the end of the day. But for me, I think he will reflect and he will say that, look, it was probably one of these below par performances yesterday.
Lads, I won't go into too much detail on the Clare Tip game. Clare got the job done as they needed to do. Might just focus on Tip, obviously, because they're out now. Clare through to a Munster final. Eddie, Liam Cahill was fairly adamant after anyway that he's definitely staying on for a third year and that he has the backing of the players. A bit of pride restored maybe yesterday. They brought Clare down the stretch. They made 7 changes before the game, obviously when the team was announced, maybe with a view to the future. I know you've given your opinions on whether Cahill is the man to go forward with Tipperary. Both of you agreed that he is, but that was probably a bit of a better way to sign off for the season anyway, after 2 bad championship performances.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think the group probably would have felt that they let themselves down no more than they let the county down in the performance last week. And when their minors in their 20s, delivered significant performances, I'm sure that was probably used as a little bit of motivation for the group, that they wanted to say, look, our season is over, but we're on our home patch in this last match, and by God, we're not going to take another clipping. Clare were coming to town, full of confidence, knowing that if they can get the job done, they were going to jump into a Munster final. So, no, in fairness to them, they stuck at it. They saw it out. They made a battle of it. And like even Cahill afterwards, like again, the interview. And I don't know. For me, I thought, someone asked him about next year. I don't know who it was asked that question. I think it's poor, like to say that, like to someone like in a situation like that. That's not the time to be asking a question like that. That's grand. That's grand if a manager is a Premier League professional manager and he's getting 10 and 12 million a year. You can bounce that little scud into him. But I just thought it wasn't the time to be asking the silly questions.
I'd be straight with you, Ned. Now, if I was doing a piece on the Tip Clare game, my editor would ask me, did you ask Liam Cahill if he's staying on for next year, or what his thoughts are? Because that's in fairness, that's what most people that's what most people on the street want to know after a bad championship campaign. So I can totally understand why it was asked, now, to be fair. And the same question was thrown at Henry as well, and he answered it like eloquently enough.
But Verney, in Liam Cahill's defence, all right, he was put under enormous pressure to take this Tipperary job. Even he gave one more year to Waterford. Even the year before, Colin Bonner took on the job. And the easiest thing for Liam Cahill probably would have been saying, right, Jesus, I'm going along nicely here in Waterford. I'll stay with Waterford for another couple of years. But no, he didn't. He stood up to the challenge. He took on the challenge. When, let's be honest about it, lads, nobody wanted it. No, nobody wanted the Tipperary job. And it's easy to take on the Tipperary challenge, knowing that, oh Jesus, now there's the under 20 cropper coming through, the minor cropper coming through, and all of a sudden now you'll have probably 4 or 5 candidates putting their hand up and saying, you know what, I'm going to go for that job. But you got to give great credit to Cahill. When others didn't want to step up to the mark or step up to the challenge, he was the one lad that said, you know what, I'll take on the challenge, and he walked away from, let's be honest about it, I wouldn't say a nice cosy number in Waterford, but the easiest thing for Liam Cahill would have been to say, right, I'll give another couple of years of Waterford, and then be the cute boy, wait for someone else to take on this transitional period and then go for it. But no, he didn't. Yeah. He stepped up to the mark, and I have the greatest admiration for him and Mikey Bevins, that they said, no what, Tipperary are under pressure. There's a bit of a transitional period here now. There's a bit of a rebuild job. I'm going to take it on, and he took on the challenge. Yeah, of that rebuild.
Just to even come back to that, to make sure, I take your point and I understand it, no problem. And I think if he's at the end of his 3-year tenure, I think that's grand. But I think the dogs in the street know that Liam Cahill got 3 years, and that's where he's going to be. And it's probably there in the background. It's something maybe to ponder maybe in a different way. But in my opinion, I just felt, and I get why it was asked, but I just thought it wasn't the time or the place. I just thought it wasn't hugely relevant at that time, given that we know he has 3 years. That's all. I appreciate what you're saying.
I think the Tipperary board owe it to Liam Cahill not to just give him year 3. I would give him year 4 and year. I think it's key now. Both Tipperary and Galway now find themselves in similar positions now, right? We don't know where Henry is in regards, what his position. Does he have the appetite to take on, a rebuild in Galway? Because that's what's lying ahead for Galway.
And that's not going to happen in 1 year.
No, and I think Liam Cahill has openly said now that this is going to take time, and he coming across from his interviews, he looks like he has the hunger to take on. Yeah. That responsibility that role, take on that job of trying to get Tipperary back being competitive again before they go challenge again. And you're not going to do that in 1 year, lads. And what I will be saying to the Tipperary County Board, this man stepped up when nobody else wanted a job. I think you have to give something back to Liam Cahill and say, right, Liam, we're going to back you. We're going to back you for the next 3 years and try and get Tipperary back to where Tipperary hurling should be.
I would agree with you, Mull. There's a lot of, I always have an admiration for a fella that steps up when nobody else does. That shows a true love and desire to be involved with your county, not just when the timing is right. So I would agree. And I do think Liam Cahill is the man for the job. And he's blooded a fair, between, even in Colin Bonner's year, there was a lot of guys blooded. And there's been more lads blooded the last 2 years. If that is the last time that we see Noel McGrath and Patrick Bonner matter on a pitch, two absolute warriors, different types of warriors, I'd say. Bonner just threw himself into everything. He was the sort of player that every team wanted, and he was so important to Tip. Noel McGrath, just risks that would make the ball talk. Just what a player. If that is the last time we see the two of them in a Tip shirt, two brilliant careers, two amazing players. Lads, you've kind of touched on Henry there, and we will give Dublin their due in a minute. But Eddie, where do you think Henry is now? Galway in his first year, beaten in the Leinster final, disappointingly, bounced back against Cork in a quarter-final, were brilliant against Limerick in an All-Ireland semi-final, should have won a Leinster title last year, but for a stray boot from Pádraig Mannion, the ball landing to Cillian Buckley's hand, ball in the back of the net, bounced back and beat Tip in a quarter-final, good for half an hour against Limerick, but faded out of it, and now this year, out of Leinster, at the round robin stages. Where do you think his future stands? And even just listen to him in an interview after, I would suggest maybe that 1 foot is kind of out the door maybe already.
Yeah, I suppose if you're to look at the trajectory of that Galway team over the 3 seasons, they've definitely gone the wrong way. And that's, look, being ultimately fair. It's not just, being critical for the sake of it, or it's not, sowing the boot in. I think the one thing we've learned over the years from when we were playing as a group was you had to accept something that was very obvious. You weren't good enough. And I think one thing I would imagine that Henry Shefflin will take from that is he knows himself. It just, they weren't at. And whatever reason, whether it was little scars from last year or whether they were, I don't know, they just never got into the groove this year at all. He said, even listened to his interview, they were lacking energy. But I suppose the big challenge, like anything, and you often see it, like for any manager, right, there's always the here and now, right? And then there's what's 2-3 years down the line? I suppose it ties into, how long are you going to stay for? How objectively can you look at that squad? And the reality was he continued to go with tried and tested. He continued to go with the older warriors, and they are some men. They delivered an All-Ireland title for Galway in 2017. But ultimately, there just wasn't enough youth coming through. There ultimately wasn't. Like Keenan Fahy is probably the one said that switch was brilliant. That worked out. Like from a guy that used to play in the forwards back to half back. But ultimately too, you look at Daithí Burke, and he's a guy that is just absolute. In the last 10, 12 years, he's up there as probably arguably the best full back of the last 10 or 12 years, 5, 6 All-Stars, whatever it is, he's won. And again, a great warrior, but he has some amount of mileage on the clock, even with football. So it catches up with lads. Davy Burke as well, like a guy who's been through a cruise ship, a big club campaign last year, and he's still looking at those guys to start. So
Eddie, just on that, 8 starters yesterday that featured in the 2017 All-Ireland final. And I know it seems a bit mad to me, because I would have thought there was a rebuild, and there is players there to rebuild with, but he did go back to the
and that was the point I was trying to get around to, was that in year one, okay, they nearly got through, but I suppose that's the point where, and it's a hard thing to do because you still want to win the here and now, but ultimately now, where Galway sit now, was it last year that he needed to be building all these young lads through and getting there? And it depends then, like you're saying, now there's a fairly big rebuilding job to do, because look, with the height of respect to guys, Mother Nature doesn't wait for these guys. And you can say, look at the Cork perspective, there's all these young lads gone in around Hoggy. So in some regards, you might get away with one or two of those guys, but you're expecting David Burke to go into the engine room now of hurling nowadays as a what, a 32, 33-year-old with a 34 with a cruciate injury in the last 12 months. That's tough going, and just energy levels just didn't seem to be there with Galway. But equally, I suppose overall, if I'm to be ultimately, fair with it, or you look at it, say, I'm not seeing what Galway were kind of about. Like it's hard to see. Yeah, you've Conor Whelan inside and different lads, Concannon inside or whatever, but they just seem to lack a real purpose and an energy. Like like tactically, it's hard to assess them, because you could see very deliberately yesterday what did Dublin do. And when I seen Dara Purcell starting to go, here's a guy with wheels, they can carry the ball, and what they seemed to do was, we're going to run Micheál Donoghue, who obviously had a little bit of inside knowledge. And if you're looking at that, he's probably going, look, lads, we need lots of youth here, carry the ball, run these lads all around the pitch. And okay, some days that worked, but yesterday it definitely worked for them. They played against the wind, they carried a lot of ball, and they just had, Galway just probably struggled to get their hands on that ball and to match them in that regard.
Do you think he'll be back, Eddie? Do you think he'll be back?
It's hard to know, because John, if he goes back, it's another 2 years at least. So it depends what he does. But I do think, like, I look at it on the human level, I just go, how he does that driving, that is tough going, lads. I don't care, like that has to fatigue you. And I know the year is maybe a little bit shorter, but like, if you were to take it, he's going to be going back up now to watch club matches if he is, like, so that's an all around the year. That's tough going. So it's hard to know, lads. If you're putting the gun to my head, I'd say maybe not. But look, he'll obviously look. You take time and you sit down and you digest everything and you assess everything and see how things are at home. Everything comes into the mix there, lads, because it's full on. Manager of an intercounty team is full on. It is all consuming, and it has to mentally wear down somebody.
Well, I think the biggest one, I don't think he will be back now, and you just touched on there. Everything comes into play, and I think family comes into play. He's 4 kids, like he's after doing it for the last 3 years of his life, and yourself, Eddie. 3 years out of a kid's life, your kids grow up so fast, and before you know it, they come and go, and you can't get those years back. And like, you think of it, it's a fierce commitment. 7, 8 months of the year. He's probably not switching off then either. He's probably up there 2-3 times a week. 2-3 times a week. The days that he's not up there, then he's possibly on the phone. The kids probably want to go off to this match. They want to go here. Yourself, Eddie, and Verney, it's coming on stream for you now. You've only one I4. You have a couple as well, Eddie. And it's difficult. It's very difficult. Even for me, Jesus, one day I'd love to get back involved with, give something back to the county, get back involved. I just don't have the time yet, because I'm being pulled and dragged here and there. And I just feel that, Henry, when he sits down with Deirdre and they reflect on the last 3 years, they break it all down, knowing what's realistically what's ahead of Galway now within the next 2-3 years, because it's a total rebuild. Yeah, he's going to whether he takes it on himself or whoever comes in there and takes on the next 2 or 3 years, probably going to have to get rid of probably some of the greatest hurlers that Galway have ever had. That's not going to be easy either. So
there's a couple of hard conversations to be had. Yeah.
If you ask me right now, I don't think Henry will be back for year 4.
But if you were to look at it this way, lads, right, and I will say it, look, I had a little taste of it, and work goes out the window, lads. It's like, especially with the round robin, when you're going from week to week, right? You tell me what hours go into traveling, looking at videos, checking in with everybody. Like, lads, there's no doubt about it. Modern managers, lads, you almost need your own office. You need your own staff, because you need to be in there from probably, like, just say you had a match on a Saturday evening, right? You're on it straight away on Sunday morning, probably 7 o'clock. You're going through your injuries. You're looking at the team you're playing next weekend. Jesus, lads, that's tough going. And then throw in a 3-hour journey to Galway as well.
Eddie, while I have you on that topic, right? Can you give myself and Verney and the listeners, you were there with Laois, an insight into a normal week of being an inter-county manager. So, like, Monday to Sunday, what was your Monday to Sunday now with Laois?
I can tell you straight away, there's nothing going to be normal about it. Now, go on, fire away, Ned.
It's every minute. Like, you will get up, you find yourself going. Once you wake up in the morning, it could be 5 o'clock, you found yourself looking at matches, getting up in the morning. It was a quiet time to go look at a match, to check something in. And yes, it depends on how much support staff you have in around you. But like, you take it on Monday morning, you're checking in, you're planning out the week ahead. You could be, is there a challenge match? Do we get it videoed? Right, is that done? Where are we with results? Where are we with physios? Where are we with injuries? Planning out the session Tuesday night. Then, getting that done, let alone checking in with players. Like, you've 30 lads that you need to possibly have a little word with them, checking in with them. So there's so much there, and it obviously, like, you obviously have to delegate out and trust the guys that are around you. I was fierce lucky in that regard. We had a small crew, but Jesus, good, really, really strong lads in Niall and Tommy there that you knew they were all over the session itself. So there's all that going on. There's then planning out maybe a match on Sunday, your logistics, the bus, the food, where are we going, what time we leaving, making out your schedule for the day, let alone the inputs to the players, which is the most important thing, a team meeting, tactics, all that stuff. Lads, and again, I will say it is, looking at some of what they're doing there now, it's phenomenal, lads. And I suppose maybe that gets lost in it at times as well. Like, you forget that, Jesus, there's a huge amount involved here. That's a serious job, lads. And we will say it for likes of Henry, we're talking about them here. Their neck is on the line, their shoulder and all of that. And that's tough. That is tough. It's mentally draining. You found at times when you could sit back after it all. I was involved in organising a golf classic there recently in Kilkenny GA. Lads, it was like the weight of the world was on your shoulders, because that you have to get it done. And again, you're so reliant on the guys around you. If you have a strong crew around you, they will definitely make your life a little bit easier. But you take it all personally. You take it all on your own shoulders.
Yeah, it's all-consuming, I'd say, to say the least. Just about Salt Hill yesterday, the fact that Micheál Donoghue's Galway career was finished in Parnell Park by the Dubs, then he takes the Dubs to Pearse Stadium, potentially finishes off some of players that he helped to bring to the promised land, maybe including David Burke, who was his captain in 2017. Just on that game, Mull, I have to say, I thought Dublin boxed so clever. It was hard to see just how strong the breeze was until Galway started having some shots in the second half. Conor Whelan took a shot from about 40 yards. He put everything into it, and it dropped into Sean Brennan's hand. Adrian Toohey took a shot from 65. Again, opened the shoulders, full strike, dropped into Brennan's hand. Dublin played the ball around the middle of the park. Yes, they were turned over a small bit, but I thought they were really, really economical with the ball. I thought they dictated the pace of the game, particularly against the breeze. And we get into it more about David Burke sending off. It obviously had a big bearing on the game. What were your own thoughts on that? Because people seem to be very mixed on it.
But like, we shouldn't be like, Galway should have been forewarned, because they done it against Kilkenny. The game I covered against Antrim, they were magnificent against Antrim as well in their use of the ball, running off the shoulder, bringing that energy, bringing that drive from midfield. They got a small bit lucky, I suppose, with the sending off. Well, look, they got a bit lucky with the sending off yesterday. They also got lucky with the elements as well in the first half. There was a stage in the midway through the first half where the breeze kind of died down for about a 10-minute period, and then it came again. But look, there's no taking away from their performance. It's very, very difficult now, lads, at inter-county level. If you go down to 14 men, the way teams are able to own the ball, spray the ball around, hold on to the ball, it's going to be very, very difficult for any team, even going forward for the rest of this championship. If you go down to, if you even go down to 14 players through a black card, you're seeing how difficult it is even for 10 minutes, let alone playing nearly 3/4 of a game with 14 men. And, playing with 14 men where you don't have much legs, you're probably relying on older players. But you've got to give great credit to the Dubs. their use of the ball. I thought Donald Burke was magnificent. And even, I was always saying about this Dara Purcell, you know, Donoghue just springs him. As Eddie touched on, knowing that, right, he brings energy, he brings legs, he brings that drive, you know, and I did touch on it even you know, coming to the latter stage of the league, that, you know, when they got all these players back in the field, that, you know, they could be a match for anybody. And all of a sudden now they even have a couple of players to spring off the bench. They look solid at the back. Owen O'Donnell, Crummy was
Crummy was unbelievable.
Crummy was unbelievable. You know, you've Burke, Hayes coming from midfield, Joel Burke, Ronan Hayes, and yeah, to their credit, you can talk all you like about how poor Galway were, or you can talk about, you know, Henry's future or whatever, but Jesus, lads, what's getting lost in all that was Dublin's performance. Dublin were pound for pound, and I even think even if it was 15-on-15, I still think they would have won the match. And you know what? They're in a great position now, find themselves in a Leinster final. And you know what? They'll go up and they'll give Kilkenny enough of it again. But lads, I'm just telling you, isn't it just set up lovely, this Leinster final and Munster final, that, and even the prize on offer now, that, you know, for both the Munster and the Leinster winners, knowing that, right, if you lose a Leinster final, there's a strong chance that you're going to be playing Cork. If you lose a Munster final, there's a strong chance that you're going to be playing Wexford, which ain't going to be easy. So I think even for both Limerick and Clare, and for both Dublin and Kilkenny, the prize is massive now when it comes to winning that final.
Big time, yeah, big time. Eddie, I just touch on David Burke sending off briefly with you. I was at the game in real time. I thought it was a sending off. When I looked back on it straight away, I thought it was a sending off. When I looked back on it this morning and last night, I was a little bit iffy. His eyes were on the man, not the ball. But the problem I probably have with this is that, to me, that type of a tackle should be a red card, because I think it's a dangerous tackle, and I think lads are going to end up mangled if that type of tackle is still allowed in hurling. But the issue is the lack of consistency across games. Yeah. And like David Burke was sent off yesterday, Kyle Hayes wasn't sent off. Or like I was looking at the Dublin under-20 game against Offaly the other night, and Donald Shirley nearly got his head taken off after 45 seconds and there wasn't even a yellow card. That's the frustrating thing for me, and that's probably the frustrating thing from a Galway point of view as well, that they lost a player and then they look at a game that's thrown in at 4 o'clock in a different province and somebody potentially does worse and doesn't get sent off.
Yeah, it is. It's frustrating, and like we've said, it's difficult. And I touched on in my article, you know, that I just feel we're probably, I keep saying this, my point has been very consistent on this. Let's help the officials. Let's help them increase the percentage of getting the calls right. Okay, that's all it is. It's not, we're all human, and I get all that side of it. But if you have somebody there, it doesn't have to, like I said there, you don't want to see these big long delays. That's not what we want here. But I do think there should be someone up helping the referee, the officials helping them. Like Henry, you know, referenced 2 things yesterday. I think one of them it's probably going to leave a right little bitter taste, like the irony of the Galway management, 2 Galway men, you know, shouting at the linesman, and David Burke gets a red like he was their captain through to.
What's your take on that, Eddie? What's your take on that?
Oh, Jesus. Do you know, and I you can understand lads going, come on, ref, I get that. But, you know, Henry didn't shy away from making that point, and I just kind of trying to think through that last night. You go, oh God, you know, you're you know, if that's what you're calling for, Jesus.
The only thing I will say, just quickly, boys.
I'm not having a go at Donoghue here. I know I get them kind of going, ref. For me, like, I agree with you, Mixer. It is a dangerous tackle, and there's part of me. I agree with the points that were made. I would argue initially, in slow down time, said, okay, it's not as bad. But you look at Cian Kenny got absolutely milled off the ball last week against Dublin, taken out completely against, like, wide open, and there was nothing about with an official standing a couple of yards away. So, like you said, the consistency is frustrating. But, you know, when part of me is saying, when David Burke lines him up there, and I know myself from doing that, when you line up a lad to commit to hit him, you want to leave you want to fucking sink him. Like, there's no point in saying it. You want to get in there. You want to leave a hit in on him. Not to maim or hurt that. That's the physical game. That's the combat of the sport. You want to get in there and hit him hard. But I do think that once you commit to that, the margin for error is so, you have to be so precise. And you'd say arguably Burke was just a fraction. He possibly needed to just ease up once he sees the fast hands. And if you do, you're giving a ref a decision.
That's a body check then, Eddie. You see, that would be a body check then, which would be a yellow. Do you know what I mean?
It's a body check, yeah. To me, I thought a body check because if he goes in high and sinks, Fergal Whiteley, okay, it's different. But they seem to be more, he caught him on the inside of the shoulder, which is borderline, as we said, it's in the grey area. But I do think the two of them banged heads as well. And, if you're saying if Burke was maybe ultra aware there, if he falls on the ground and stays on the ground, it may not have happened. But it's just one of those things.
Just going back to the Micheál Donoghue, like that's, I can see the two sides of it now where David Burke now possibly mightn't talk to Micheál Donoghue for 6 months to a year now. That could potentially... Just
one thing I'm going to come in on you, Mull, there. Micheál Donoghue was interviewed before Henry, so Henry came out with those comments. They are I would say they are alleged comments. Like, he doesn't.
Okay.
That's the one thing I will say. You don't know that for a fact. Yes. That's what he was saying. That's the one caveat, and I even put that in my report. You don't know that was 100% what he was saying. That's you think that's what he might have said. You think that's what he was implying, but you're not 100%. Do you know what I mean?
No, well, we're not. But so Henry's coming out and he's saying that I don't know who went to the linesman and he said, look, that's a straight red. But like, I can see both sides of it. If those words did play out in the words of what Henry was saying, did happen. All right, I can see two sides to it. I can see, and I had me in a club game against Ballygunner in 09 where, a player is to play with went into the umpire. I felt hard done by a fella came in and hit me, and I hit the other player back, and then one of the Ballygunner players who I actually played with Waterford ran into the umpire. You seen that he has to go, and I could see. I actually didn't speak to that player for about nearly 6 months, 7 months, and then after a period, then he just said, we agreed, we shook hands on it, said, look, I was wrong, I should have done it. But I was so annoyed that he ran into the umpire and said, you seen that, he has to go. But I could also see in the other side of it where it was such an important match, knowing that he was what he was doing for his team, knowing that, right, if we get him sent off, there's a strong chance De La Salle go down to 14, we're going to win the match. And I can see both sides of it now where if a play is out that, O'Donoghue probably did do what Henry is saying he done, and he said, right, it's a red card, you've seen that, he has to go. I can see why Micheál Donoghue would do that, because he's trying to get a big advantage for his team, because he's to take his Galway allegiance out and saying, I'm now doing a job for Dublin. If Galway go down to 14 men, there's a great chance that we're going to push on it and win the game. But I can also see where David Burke's annoyance is if it did play out, he's saying, well, I won an All-Ireland. I went up the steps of the whole.
We soldier together. I'd be pissed if I'm David Burke. I'd be, because it's different if it's blatant. I think if it's absolutely stone cold, saw the lads, you can have no arguments. But I remember having a little small similar situation. We played a club match years ago against Freshford, and McCavanagh went to take a sideline ball, and one of our lads was standing in front of him, and Cav just swings over the ball and connects on your man. And like, no matter what, I was like, oh geez, if he's in my own head, I was like, after I've seen that, there's no question. But I could not, despite the fact that I absolutely wanted to be I just couldn't. I couldn't say, Jesus, no way would I. I couldn't do that. And much and all as it might be obvious or whatever. And that's all. I know we're talking, like you said, Mick, it is alleged or whatever, but it's just, it's a hard one, isn't it? It's like, as you said, John, yeah, Micheál Donoghue has a job to do, but there's also the human side of it, because they have a bonds that will stand to them up to that, and you're saying, geez, we're not trying to stir the pot here or anything like that, but that's tricky. Like if you're David Burke and you go in there, not with intention or anything like that, and then you hear this, and I think was a Sean Linan seemed to be very annoyed over it and beckoned over. So it was just, look, I suppose we don't.
And let's be honest, lad. Like it's an incident that probably played a major role in probably being.
It shaped the match. It definitely
probably being the end of an awful lot of that 2017, crew. Like I must say, look, David Burke has struggled with injuries. What's to say, wouldn't it be an awful shame if that was to be David Burke's last ever, time putting on a maroon and white jersey, So you just don't know what could play out like, and I can see both sides, David Burke, and I can see why Micheál O'Donoghue, if it's allegedly true, that why he would fight the cause of trying to get one of Galway's best players sent off,
Hey, Ned, there's a reason why you didn't go shouting for Mick Kavanagh, because you knew you were going to get sawed up fairly quickly after, I can tell you that.
Jeez, I tell you, no better, lad. You put your hand up for the ball in training. The following night, he'd let you know you were around. He was around. So I was probably the hamster was going as well. Going, I know, jeez, I'm not going to call for that. He'll take it all out of me and train the next internal match.
There was a big sending off, lads, in the Carlow Antrim game as well. And like Chris Nolan, there was a bit of a schmozzle before or just after the half-time whistle, and Chris Nolan kind of threw a lad to the ground. I thought it was harmless enough. Now I'd be straight with it.
Ridiculous. And I'll jump in, Mixer, ridiculous.
Just quickly, Eddie, what the real sickening part of it is that he's not sent off until he returns to the field for the second half.
That's mad stuff.
So if you're manager, you're like, oh, we've got 15 lads for the second half, and we're playing this sort of system.
Now you find out.
You land out, and again, that's probably played. And fair dues to Antrim, they pushed on, won by 6 points after.
No,
that's played a big part in that result as well.
I think I can't recall the incident, Mick, but something like that happened a couple of years ago. Was it somewhere where
I can't
happened and but the ref went to the dressing room straight away and notified the management. Geez, it just escapes me now who it was.
Oh, I know what you're talking about, and I remember there was a big enough game, but I can't think of it offhand. Yeah.
But there was something like that where the ref went down the halls. Once they have that information, I think that should be communicated straight away. Like that's brutal to come back out, whereas at least you have the 15 minutes to gather your thoughts and change your game plan, whereas you're now in a very, very dynamic situation when you land back out onto the pitch and you find that out. But in the overall scheme of it, I just find it incredible that you can pick out one guy in a bit of handbags like that. And yeah, he threw a lad to the ground, but there's lads been knocked to the ground in that episode. So I just thought it was unnecessary and a bit unfair to single out one fella. Like I said there, if he saws a lad in half, that's different. But to me, it was just, it probably shouldn't have. And there's so much at stake in that match. That match is probably even more important than any of the rest of the matches that were going on.
Well, lads, I'm sure we touched on Micheál O'Donoghue and David Burke, and I'm sure now over the course of time now, the two of them will pick up the phone and say, geez, they'll iron it out. Would you ever come across a situation where a referee might pick up the phone to a player and say, you know what, I hold my hand up, I got it wrong, I shouldn't have sent you off. Did
you? Go on, Ned, go on.
No, it's probably better off not to. But
come on, Ned, come on. The listeners want to hear it.
No names needed, Eddie. No names. We can guess ourselves.
Yeah, there was an episode in a match there where, again, got sent off or whatever, and again got contacted by the ref to say, oh yeah, we felt something had to have happened. And I was just, once I heard that, I said, oh here, good luck, I don't want to talk to you.
Ned, if they didn't see, like, you cannot send someone off if someone hasn't seen it.
No, and that's the thing, and I look, I've no problem saying it. I've had episodes where I probably should have been sent off, had an episode where I did get sent off one day, felt very harsh about. They're just the swings and roundabouts of it. I have to accept that. And
hey, how did you respond to the referee when he says that?
I just said, good luck, don't bother. You shouldn't have rang me with that. I had no problem ringing and having a good conversation and saying, look, whatever. But once he said we felt something had to have happened, we felt something had to have happened. I just went, that's it. Good luck. I said, don't, you should that, you know, and that was it. I genuinely, I was about to explode, but I said, no, don't. So.
Hey, just quickly, lads, because we're a small bit caught for time. Ned, I know you were in Nolan Park yesterday. Yeah. Kenny got the result. Important to get a victory over Wexford as well. I have to ask you about the pitch, though. I couldn't get over the pictures that I saw in the aftermath of the Bruce Springsteen concert. Like, it looked like a large area of in around the goals, and I think it was the 21 inwards. It was completely bare. It was a mad scenario. Yeah,
look, I don't know what was the reason why, because look, in fairness, there's a lot of fixtures flagged. I mean, I'm sure that, look, yeah, to get Bruce Springsteen into Nolan Park, I'm sure that was probably at least 12 months in the making, maybe. So I don't know. You'd say, look, if they were looking back on that, it shouldn't clash with a hurling game. Ideally, you know, if you're saying it's in 2 weeks' time, grand, you could roll with it. That's easy to say now. But yeah, it's a shame because the other length of the pitch, as always, is just immaculate. It was just absolutely immaculate, and you've seen it there during the week. You know, I don't know it. You know, thankfully, it didn't look like there was any bad bounce of a ball, but far from ideal conditions down at that end.
I tell you something, Eddie, your head is on the chopping block and all the Kilkenny boys. If something happens with Adam Screeney in that under-20 final and a ball bounces wrong, I tell you, you're in big trouble.
I know. I'll pass on that to Kevin McGarry and the boys inside that are looking after the pitch. And said we'll tell them that the pressure's on. No, the one thing I will say, look, to the boys, look, whatever went on, they done their best with it, and I guarantee you, it will be much improved by come the weekends, because look, they'll obviously have, you know, a week of looking after it and getting it back to it. You know, it won't be near the rest of the pitch, but it will still be fairly good. But it's just one of those things. You'd say ideally, in an ideal world, you should be trying to avoid that happening, because you just want it in its pristine condition. But just overall, even the match itself, look, I will say, thankfully, there wasn't any bad bounces down that end. There wasn't any fumble lifts with it. But it was a good game of hurling, lads. A right good game, fitting of the occasion. And geez, I tell you what it was, lads. It was intense and physical. There was some good hitting in it. But I suppose the big talking point, which was highlighted yesterday, you know, as a friend said to me yesterday, he says, geez, he said, how in the name of God did he not give Mossy Keown, you know, if your man done everything to him, he said, bar take his wallet and his mobile phone out of his pocket, like Matty Hanlon was pulling and dragging out of him. And that's the incident for me that is the most obvious. Obviously, they made the slip up with the one for Owen Cody because he was nowhere near the big square when they pulled him and dragged him to the ground. So how they slipped up with the black card, I'm not saying this, I'm obviously Kilkenny, but I think it was a lot more obvious than that. And Mossy Keown's one. So that's where, for me, that the officials need to be on their game. Like, surely one of the umpires or the linesmen, you know, shout to Liam Gordon that, "Jeez, Liam, you know, Mossy Keown, he couldn't be any closer to the goal when he got fouled in the first half." And again, I have to be fair. I would say the exact same the other way around. You know, you have to call that as it is, and they're just examples of the consistency. But Kilkenny took over in the second half. You know, Wexford got that big shot in the arm, getting that goal before half time. Conor MacDonald, you know, was a handful there in the first half. And just whatever happened in the second half, Wexford, just for 20 minutes of that second half, Kilkenny seemed to just drop a little bit back. Richie Reid took into that match. Conor Fogarty was significant coming on. He really brought a physical presence to that landing zone. And Kilkenny arguably should have had, I would say, they could have had that lead out to 7, 8, 9 points at one stage. Couple of really, geez, the master himself, like, he puts over a sideline, and then he had two inexplicable wides, like, which I'll give him. TJ has definitely built up enough credit over the years to kind of say, okay, we'll give you one of those, TJ. But he had two outrageously, you know, wides, which were unlike him. But Kilkenny, by not probably finishing off Wexford, then they seem to drop back a fraction and allow them on. So good game. As I use Muller's quote and borrowing a few of you today, John, it was squeaky bum time coming down the last couple of minutes. But Kilkenny, ultimately, that third quarter was where they put the foundations in place. and they were just able to hold off Wexford. They were able to nullify Chin, they were able to nullify Rory O'Connor's influence on that match, and they're the key men for Wexford.
4 teams through now, obviously Kilkenny through to a Leinster final against Dublin, and Wexford through in 3rd place. They will play the Joe McDonagh Cup runners-up, I think, and the winners play Cork, to the best of my knowledge. So that's Laois and Offaly on Saturday week, and the Leinster final obviously is Saturday week, and the Munster final is Sunday week. Lads, I'll fly through your moment of the weekend. Mull, your moment of the weekend.
Darren McCarthy's score for Tip Friday night. Right up there with Aina Burke's one to win the Club All-Ireland. This lad is a special talent. You're talking about Tipperary nurturing players, bringing players through. He's definitely one lad that's going to put his hand up. An incredible score. Did
you see the picture, boys? It was outrageous. You're wondering, how does he score from there?
Yeah.
Cork defender's hurl is directly in the passage of the ball as well, and you're wondering, how does he score from where he did? It was an outrageous score. Now, lads, there was obviously a massive boo-boo in that game as well. Like, Cork should have had the goal. The ball actually touched the net. The keeper touched it up through the net, young Horgan. Like, I don't know how that wasn't given in a big game like that, but Tip obviously rode their luck, and obviously our former Irish independent colleague Brendan Cummins getting his first title on the board as Tip under-20 manager too. But there was plenty of controversy around that game. Ned, your moment of the weekend?
Yeah, look, you'd hate to focus on that, but like Ben O'Connor was as honest as he could be with that, and that's hard to take, like, because it just seems so obvious. But I suppose I'm looking at maybe I'm going to give it. Look, I like to kind of sometimes look at teams that are maybe we don't tend to give as much credit to, but a guy we spoke about earlier on, you know, he was away from Dublin there last year, but I just think Chris Crummey has really brought a leadership to this Dublin team that maybe they were lacking last year, and he is really delivering. He really brought the fight to Kilkenny last week, and I just thought his couple of points, you know, were real proper leadership. So I suppose just maybe his overall performance for me is significant in getting Dublin into a Leinster final again, that they will definitely feel they have a great chance in.
Great stuff, man. That's it for a packed show this week. Thanks to Eddie Brennan and John Mullane for joining me once again. We'll be back in the middle of next week to preview the Munster and Leinster finals, as well as the Joe McDonagh Cup decider. And in the meantime, don't forget to rate, review and follow the show on Apple, Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from. Thanks for listening and goodbye.